Hello everyone. Have you noticed that suddenly the term Global South is everywhere? Leaders across the globe are talking about it. Why does it matter? Let us find out. Before we define what the Global South is, let us for the moment think of it as all countries that are not Western. Later in the discussion, we shall explain what the Global South is. The Global South is making its presence felt in many ways, essentially by challenging the Western dominated political and economic order. On the economic side is this thing called de-dollarization. Now, de-dollarization is just a fancy way of saying that countries do not want to rely exclusively on using the US dollars for settling international trade.
That is why many countries are promoting de-dollarization, meaning many countries are substituting the US dollar as the currency used for trading oil and other commodities. The dominant role of the dollar in the global economy has given the United States massive power to influence other countries' economies. All this while it has given the US the power to impose sanctions as a tool to achieve foreign policy goals. This is one reason for de-dollarization. And the second reason is the United States also has this bad habit of printing money and distributing money in the form of physical currency, such as banknotes, as well as electronically, through various mechanisms including open market operations and lending facilities. They use this strategy to manage the stability of the economy. So even this is a reason of de-dollarization. And the third reason is, now that we are seeing United States debt is increasing massively year by year, and they are also reaching the debt ceiling limit frequently. So there is a high chance that the US government will default on its debt payment, and the US economy will dip into recession anytime. And that will definitely affect the international financial system. The central banks of many countries are aware of the scenario. Therefore, the smartest thing that any country's central bank can do is de-dollarize the economy as soon as possible, so that by reducing reliance on the US dollar, countries can better prepare themselves for potential financial crisis.
On the political side, the Global South is challenging the Western dominated so called rules based order. But this did not happen overnight. For a very long time, the members of the Global South had been complaining that the international system is unfair. It works against them. International laws are selectively applied to favor the West. In addition, the United Nations Security Council and other international institutions such as the IMF and the World Bank were all seen as favoring the West. So this long-held feeling of resentment broke out with the outbreak of the Ukraine-Russian war. Although the Global South countries are opposed to the war, they are also opposed to the selective application of international law. The sanctions, for example, that's pushed onto Russia is seen as problematic because not only it hurts Russia, but it also hurts them.
Russia is feeling the shock of Western sanctions.
They will hit the Russian economy hard.
Waging economic war on Russia on a scale that would have been unimaginable just a year ago.
And then there is this move to supply weapons to Ukraine, which is something that the Global South opposes because in its view, the way to resolve the conflict is not by fueling the conflict, but through peaceful means of resolving the conflict. Another way the South is challenging Western dominance is through BRICS.
The group of emerging economies known as BRICS makes up more than 40% of the world's population and a quarter of the global economy. And more countries want to join the club, which aims to challenge a world order seen to be dominated by the US and its Western allies.
This is the reason why there is such a long queue of countries now waiting to join this grouping. And this is also the reason why that there is a lot of interest looking forward to the BRICS summit that will be held in Kazan later this year. So the voice of the Global South has become far too loud to be ignored. This is the reason why Prime Minister Anwar also had to touch on this subject when he visited India recently. Now, so far, if you have noticed that there is this growing confidence among developing countries, you're right. But it was not always like that, you know. In the 1950s and 60s, many Asian and African countries were getting their independence from their former colonial masters. Some were lucky to get it peacefully, others had to fight for it. But whatever it was, to their horror, the leaders found out that they really did not have a freedom of choice. The global order had already been set to favor the Western powers. And on top of it, they found themselves having to take sides between the US and the USSR. This put them in a spot. They were not interested to take sides, so there had to be another way. This is what that led to the conference in Bandung, known as the Bandung Conference in 1955.
At the Asian African Conference, 29 nations with a population of more than 1,400,000,000 persons attend the historic conference in Indonesia's capital city of Bandung.
The Bandung Conference provided this mental framework that there was a possible way of asserting themselves without suffering the consequences of not taking sides. They knew that they had to cooperate among themselves, but nothing happened, not at least immediately after the Bandung Conference. It was not until 1962 when the luminaries of these developing countries got together and pushed for the formation of the non-aligned movement. And 2 years later, in 1964, a group called the Group of 77 was established in the United Nations. So you had the political structure under NAM, and you had the economic forum under G77, where the developing countries now could articulate their vision, which they had formulated in Bandung in 1955. So far, I've told you about how these poor, newly independent developing countries got together. In Bandung, they called themselves the Afro-Asian Group. They did not call themselves the South or the Global South. So where did this term come from? The actual usage of the term Global South is attributed to American activist, a left-wing activist known as Carl Oglesby, who described the poor developing countries as the Global South. Since then, the term had become used by in official description as something like a shorthand to describe the developing countries, the poorer countries, etc. The term became more concrete following a study carried out by a commission led by the former German Chancellor Willy Brandt. The study was on global inequality. The study revealed a very interesting fact. It appeared as if most of the developed countries were in the northern hemisphere, whereas the more poorer developing or underdeveloped countries were in the southern hemisphere. This divide today is represented by what is known as the Brandt line, below which are the members of the Global South, the poorer developing and underdeveloped countries. Even with that, we are still not very sure who are actually the members of the Global South. We know that most of them are below the Brandt line. Some of them are members of the non-aligned movement, and others are members of the G77. The NAM has about 120 members, whereas the G77 has grown to be 134 members. So you can roughly say that the Global South is about 120 to 134 members. So what has the Global South achieved? Well, through the non-aligned movement and the G77, they have been able to articulate the views of the developing countries. However, with the end of the Cold War in 1989, the rules of the games changed. Suddenly the divide was no longer there, and NAM came into question. So that is when NAM members decided to take part in the globalization move, to participate in economic liberalization. Regional organizations like ASEAN pursued their own free trade agreements within themselves as well with other countries. And many free trade agreements were also pursued around the world. The US promoted APEC as a means of opening up global trade, an open free trading system as they used to call it. However, that very system promoted by the United States became a source of worry for America, as now suddenly China was able to use that system to rise dramatically as an economic competitor. The turning point came with the financial crisis of 2008. By this time, China was definitely not seen as a constructive partner, but as a competitor that must be curbed. So the US turned towards containing China. This containment of China took several forms. First, APEC was pushed to the periphery. Next, the concept of the Asia Pacific itself was discontinued, and in its place, a peculiar construct known as Indo Pacific was pushed forward. The US also pulled out of free trade deals and imposed tariffs and sanctions on China. With this rivalry between the United States and China, the members of the Global South found themselves once again in this familiar but unpleasant situation of having to take sides. Only this time the choice was between the United States and China. Rather than picking sides, the Global South now wants to fall back on its tried and tested method of taking a middle path. Only this time they have much stronger clout rather than.
Let's look at how this is expected to change by the year 2030. China's GDP will continue growing. Even accounting for a natural slowdown given the economy's size, the country may still end up with an economy twice the size of the United States. Already, 5 of the 10 largest companies in the world are located in China. India will shift up into second position. Some of this growth will be fueled by rapid urbanization, as many of the world's fastest growing cities are located in India. Indonesia's economy is expected to triple, surpassing the size of India's today. The country's capital, Jakarta, is projected to become the world's biggest megacity by 2030.
So, does the Global South matter? Yes, it does, because now the Global South has the economic and political clout. And so the growing influence of the South matters because it is bound to spark debate across a wide variety of subjects. As the Global South is no longer content to be a passenger in this world order, this shift also means that we are likely to see much more political activism from the leaders of the Global South as they seek to assert themselves on the global stage. However, this political activism on the world stage may provoke dissension at home, especially if the public opinion diverges from the views of the leaders. In the end, the resurgence of the Global South could lead to a new era of global engagement, but it may at the same time paradoxically provoke political instability in many countries around the world as well. So what do you think? Do you think the Global South matters? I would love to hear your comments. And also please hit the like, share, subscribe button.